Yeah, and it's funny watching how other people like create their content too, because you start thinking like, oh, I see how this works. It's the same thing when you start shooting competition. You start seeing how people like make decisions,
Yep.
and so we'll just jump right into it. So,
Let's go.
Ethan, welcome back on the show. We're getting you in as much as possible during this summer away from home.
Three-peat.
Yeah, right. So, it's good to talk. Thanks for the water, by the way.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting us over.
It's great always having you here.
So I think the topic that we wanted to start on was the Craig Robertson shooting out of Utah. Now you had moved away from Utah, but I don't know if the state necessarily has the relativeness there. I don't know, like
It does, but it doesn't. I mean, I love the place. I think it's a little bit more interesting when there's an event such as that in a place that I have been to, similar to when Kenosha popped off, and
Yeah.
I had lived on 6th Street and they burned down the tattoo shop I worked at. Like, it was so much more personal and out of the blue than, of course, this shooting, but it still is interesting. It's like, oh, this happened where I used to live, basically.
so. And the Kenosha shooting, the Kenosha event was like that was because I was in Minneapolis when 2020 happened, and so all that was going down in my backyard, and
Yeah.
then Kenosha, which was Rittenhouse, was your old stomping grounds, if you want to use those terms, and then we have Utah, and
Yeah.
even like Utah even had they had another shooting during the riot as well.
They had a couple.
They had a couple.
Yeah, they had a couple. I don't remember the kid's name, but they thought he went for something in his waistband, and two officers ended up unloading their mags into his back, and it turned out I don't think he had a gun. And it was like, come on, man, like, it's not the right time to be doing this.
Yeah, not a good look.
No. And then it just fueled everything.
Fair enough. So we were kind of talking about the Craig Robertson shooting event is not only extremely relevant to gun culture, but it's such a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Because you've got animosity in the country. You've got a perfect opportunity for anybody of any political standpoint to make political hay off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a life and death decision that was made by multiple people at multiple times and its appropriateness. And so it's interesting. I think this one is even more like intriguing that there isn't a huge response to it like there was a response to the death of George Floyd.
To a degree, I mean, looking on Twitter, which I try to do once a day, it seemed like there was a lot more response from this. They're not making him a Ruby Ridge, but it's kind of a reminder that's like, hey, look, if you disagree, you get squashed, or if you make threats, you get squashed.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the issue of making threats, though.
Yeah. So what I saw was a lot of people were like, oh, like, your First Amendment rights to speak out gets you no knock rated at whatever.
Okay.
It's kind of like that line, I guess, is what I was seeing on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I think you and I have similar and maybe some different views on it.
Yeah, well, let's start with what we know.
Yes.
Because what the information that's came out from this hasn't necessarily changed the game, but it's kind of helped solidify. Even calling them facts is kind of a stretch, but the events and the ways that the event that has been described has changed the way that people have to interact with it, and it's a useful tool. It sounds so impersonal to say useful tool, but it's a useful tool for the culture to look at a situation like this that has very real consequences.
Yes.
Because maybe we can cross some bridges where they have been burned down in the past here, but this is the outcome that took place here is not something that anybody should want.
No, of course
Like,
not.
we don't want this as our future.
No.
We don't want people making death threats against the president or feeling like they have to be compelled to, and we don't want people being hunted down in their house because of dissent.
Yeah.
But as far as we know, like, was there any elements of Ruby Ridge where the characters were making legitimate intent and capability of threatening people, or was that because that was a very different story?
Right. I don't know. It seemed to be with him. I mean, it's interesting because I've heard conflicting things to where, he was, obviously he was, I think, in his 70s, possibly overweight, maybe walked with a cane. So him saying, time to dust off the ghillie suit and a sniper rifle, it's kind of like, okay, man.
It's not something that it's not something, it's not a legitimate threat or not a threat that you take very seriously.
True.
It's the same. We see this often. Like the inverse of it is like when you encounter like kind of a young gangster kid, like a young inner city gangster kid. It's like it's sad that you think that you're threatening people is legitimate because if you're in a gang, even if you're in the Bloods, dude, like your grip on culture and your relevance to the world stage of use of force is actually really small. The reason why gangs like that continue to exist is because society continues to abide their existence. It's not the same thing with like the American military. It's not the same thing with like the SWAT teams. It's not the same thing with Russia. It's we don't abide Russians' existence. It's a legitimate challenge that we have to deal with because they have the capability of force.
Right.
Whereas even if you're in a nationally sized syndicated gang in the United States, you're not exactly pulling the same weight when it comes to use of force that like the Navy SEALs are using or HRT might be using or
to a degree. And then I think it depends on who you're talking about too. I don't know about your experience, but I've met and hung out with almost any member of any, from Hells Angels to Mongols to Outlaws to Crips to Bloods to everything. I've had interactions, and it does depend. I mean, obviously, the Bloods are not the same as the cartel.
Very true. Yeah. Cartel is a very legitimate issue.
Yes. And like, there's a little bit different when it's like, okay, you're on site in Minneapolis, you're not going to get capped in Texas. If it's like the Bloods, for instance, or what have you. They might, but it's like your chances are rare as opposed to like, hey, if you piss off the cartel, they're going to find you.
That's a very big difference, yeah. And so regional conflicts versus international strengths are something to be determined. And that's something that's a perspective that I would like to pull out more from you because my experience with, let's just call it semi-organized crime, has been a very asymmetrical. Always a very asymmetrical experience where I'm either in a position where I am not like I know I'm in jeopardy, so it's an escape and evade mentality,
right.
Or it's I have overwhelming force that I'm deciding to withdraw or restrain.
Right.
And so it's very similar to that Afghanistan problem of if I were to go to Afghanistan right now as a citizen, as just a civilian, right? My interaction with the Taliban would be very different than if I was going over there as a U.S. Army Ranger, knowing that I have the full weight of the military behind me.
Yes.
But the fact is that I am capable of having the full weight of the U.S. military behind me because I can join the military.
Right.
And the existence of the military is very different than the existence of like a gang violence. It doesn't mean that if I go into North Minneapolis and start spouting my mouth off, I'm not going to die. It's just it's an asymmetrical amount of force.
Yeah.
So Craig Robertson and I don't think anyone should be celebrating his death. I think that's
not at all. A man lost his life, whether who he threatened or not. You never want to see a loss of life. Period.
But there's a question to be asked with the legitimacy of his threat.
Yes.
The use of law in a pseudo legal sense, not a lawyer. There you go. Is that in order for a crime to be considered valid, or in order for a threat, there has to be intent and there has to be capability. And this also plays a little bit in philosophy too. Is that in order for there to be a justified response, there has to be intent and capability. So if somebody threatens you but doesn't have any capability of doing it, that's your moral it's your moral responsibility to be able to evaluate that. But at the same time, people will veil their capabilities all the time, and that rings a very real threat question.
True. I think that's something maybe perhaps we in the gun community should perhaps do as well. It's kind of veil, like, it's really easy. If I make a threat, someone just has to Instagram me and be like, yeah, dude's a threat. So there you go. Bang. I have those two implications in. But I think the more kind of, I don't know, elusive we can be might help against that.
Yeah, either we gun culture exists in tension between fully overt,
Mm-hmm.
fully culturally overt. We're very much so in the face of the world, and not the word irrelevant is not the right word, but almost submissively withdrawn.
Right.
Right. So, and this is one thing that we've seen. This is why I think the Craig Robertson case is not only relevant to a moral question, but also how gun culture plays in society. And we were talking about it, and we're going to continue having this conversation because it's not only relevant to gun culture, but it's so relevant to our time.
It really is.
And it's not so much to be a critique on what he could have done better, because gun culture does that all the time, right? Oh, well, I would have done this. It's like, okay, man, when I hear that, I hear somebody trying to assert dominance in a place they shouldn't be. You're missing the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So on the one hand, Craig, let's go with some of the details that we knew started happening. So the president of the United States was coming to Utah for some political reason, and as a result, we have reason to believe that Craig both knew about it and was making commentary on it in a threatening manner.
Yeah, I saw at least 4 or 5 of like the screenshots from his Facebook posts of what he said, and what he said, of course, was very, very threatening.
It was very overt, right?
It was
Yeah, it's very overt, and from what I saw, the same thing, and that comes with a certain level of like what do you call it? Caution, because we saw in 2020, like the Black Lives Matter advocates were willing to go so far as to publicly announce their desire to lynch or effectively lynch a police officer in St. Paul because of supposed screenshots of a conversation between somebody who claimed to be some guy's ex-girlfriend, saying that the guy, this is like the Umbrella Man conspiracy of 2020. In the short story of what happened there is, after the death of George Floyd, there was a protest, and that was on the verge of, or was already, a riot. People have their opinions on it already. And something that either had an escalating or a causal factor was that there was some sort of auto parts store that was across the street from the precinct that was being protested.
Yeah, we've all seen the video, I think.
And it starts on fire because some dude apparently like sneaks into the crowd, smashes the glass, and throws something in there, which causes it to start on fire, which turns the what could have been considered a protest into a riot. Yeah. And as a result, it starts burning. They start burning down buildings, and it almost like this sense of guilt. The loudest components of this riot people blamed some guy that they didn't know for their own actions, for inciting a riot. And then they claimed that it was a police officer from a neighboring city, and they went so far as to create this Facebook justification. And this whole story is basically to say that we have to be careful when we see screenshots of social media as justification, because if you know anything about image manipulation, those are going to be the easiest ones. Yeah. Generic font, super easy to find, conversation, throw it a name. I can build all of this stuff on my phone now without even publishing it so I don't get in trouble, and then like screenshot it, right? So there's an air of distrust that needs to be solved in that regards. And this is where we have to trust the FBI. But given the case, in the event that it's not a false flag, and it's in the event that it's a legitimate happening, the response to the threats raises the next question. Was the response to these alleged threats appropriate?
Right.
I've been talking for a while, so I kind of need to clear my head.
No, it's all right. I definitely feel the same. And someone brought up a good argument too, which was how many people called for, Trump's head that never got, their door breached in the middle of the night. But those people, like, rules for thee, but not for me. So like, it does not help the look that there is a war on the right.
No, you're right on the money there.
Yeah.
And the right has latched onto this. And I think so I'm going to rule out the
It's kind of given them more fan the flames to be like, see,
more proof in the pudding,
exactly.
right? It's more exactly. And let's rule out the celebrity thing real quick, because like Eminem has threatened to, Eminem has used his lyrics to make threatening things. That Kathy Griffith did the famous.
Did you just see the new one?
No.
She posted another one.
She did?
Yeah, like the other day.
Kathy.
It's rough.
She did another like threatening Trump.
Another headless Trump picture, yeah.
I'm not concerned about Kathy Griffith or Eminem using their position, using their resources, their financial resources. Eminem's not going to fight the president. He doesn't want to lose his money. He doesn't want to lose his position in society. Eminem is a satiated beast. He's just saying things because it gets him attention. The problem is that people listen to him. Which is the same argument that was brought up against Trump, especially during the January 6th issue.
Yes.
But I think these celebrities making these claims is funny because they're not going to do anything about it. They're just going to isolate themselves from the consequences of their claims. But what happens when people who are not millionaires make threats? It's not like... you can go on Twitter all the time and see people make threats.
That's almost all it is, yeah.
And you're on the money for the right. The right is definitely looking at it and going, well, how come I can get on Twitter and be on the left and threaten the use of Abram X tanks against my opponents?
Yeah.
But
or F-16s.
Or F-16s, right? You're the president. You're like, you don't have an F-16, we'll bomb your city or whatever. Allegedly. And then the right is some old guy in his house starts threatening to pull out a ghillie suit and shoot the president, which is a tactically stupid move, but we're not expecting everything.
Yeah.
It is lopsided. It is a lopsided environment. Once more, there's evidence of it. And I think if we wanted to create some peace in the culture war, and this is an interesting statement, or it's something that's come up to me in the past, is if we wanted to have some sort of like coming together and not just a further escalation of force in the culture war, I think what the right needs is they need an apology from the left. And they need a legitimate apology for ignoring them on everything. The right was correct on social media censorship. They were being unequivocally over persecuted on social media, and they were getting we've seen the merger of the fascist merger of government and private entity, specifically to limit the communication of the right. And I think, or even people have been saying for a long time, we're not here to take your guns, and now they're here to take your guns.
Yeah.
I think the right needs the cultural right needs a legitimate apology on they were right from the beginning, and no one wants to come to terms with that. Yeah. And that's the part that I think is getting skipped over.
Another dollar in the Alex Jones was right jar.
Yeah. But even an apology would go really far.
I think so to a degree, yeah.
Even like we're sorry for being an asshole about this.
Right.
Because once again,
I wonder how that would go, because at least for me, this is just my take, I feel like everyone's kind of past that point.
You think so?
I mean, I feel that way. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's like, oh, I'm sorry. And like, well, even if it was legit genuine, they're going to like, nah, man, like, we're done.
We're done.
Like, that means nothing.
The factions are established. And they will not be changing.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. I certainly see an avenue where that I don't see any attempt at de-escalation coming from the left. I don't see any attempt.
Not within the next year, no.
And the next year and a half is going to be really strange for the world, especially the United States, because we've got foreign countries trying to build themselves into international superpowers. So that's the Thucydides trap.
Yeah.
And then we've got the United States perpetually on the brink of some sort of civil war. Now we've got to have an Alex Jones was right, and we have to Tim Pool Civil War was
the Tim Pool bingo.
The Tim Pool bingo card. Oh, I just lost my shades. But Tim Pool says Civil War. Maybe maybe someone should create like an investment bank off of that, where you're just like every time Tim Pool says that, you just take $1 and you put it in the piggy bank. Yeah. I don't know. That's not financial advice.
Maybe I'll actually just start Venmoing Tim Pool $1 every time he was right and see if it goes anywhere.
I don't know what to do with that. You're like, maybe it should be the other.
But no, it's gonna be interesting. I don't know if we want to keep talking about Craig or.
Well, let's go in. Let's dig a little deeper
before we get into 2024.
Yeah, let's use Craig as. I think we need to go a little bit deeper into Craig because we have the. Let's just do it. Let's go full rabbit hole into it.
Okay.
I have an issue. So I think that when I'm looking at it from just from an external perspective, and then coming from the experience of having like doing raids, especially raids with potentially armed individuals, I think that given what I understand, I don't think that the actions of the people on the ground were unreasonable. The FBI. But my perspective is this: is that if given conditions, that none of this was manufactured, that you have a man in a home threatening to shoot people, threatening violence, overtly on social media, which is not a smart move, but people do it all the time.
Yeah.
And this guy, the guy is armed because he has claimed that he is armed. He has taken pictures of his stuff that he is armed, and he regularly talks about it. And I understand why an agent, let's just say an agent, would be hesitant to just do like
a welfare check.
Yeah. Especially because of the animosity that the nation has, so many people in the nation have towards the FBI. At the same time, I think that there is room for a de-escalation there. So if it comes to be the case that they set up to do a call out, which is what it sounds like, and a call out is where you cordon off a building so that there's no way for people to escape. There's no squirters. Technical term for someone trying to escape a target building is a squirter. Don't make that sexual. Too late. And then, so they cordon off a building so that there's no way for they have an outer defense and an inner defense, and then they essentially tell the people inside the building to leave. If they don't leave, then you have to escalate. And escalation can be tear gas in the house. It can be turning a call out into a raid, knocking down the front door. It can be whatever, right? There's all these tools at their disposal.
Yeah.
So why did it escalate from why the first question is, why did the FBI think that they needed to do that level of a call out against this man? And is somebody who deals with some aspect of security and violence willing to take the risk of saying he's not going to do anything? He's not going to do. Is this an empty threat?
Right.
And that's a legitimate question. And as a result, I think that the left receives a lot more lenience on threats not being considered legitimate than the right. And maybe for good reason. Because the right doesn't make threats as much.
No.
But the left does it all the time. And so now you can't respond to every single one.
Yeah. But
that doesn't mean that...
So I guess when an overt right pops up, it's kind of like whack-a-mole for the left. It's like, okay, well, let's... Oh, we got one. We got a threat. Let's go get it.
Yeah. I think that's honestly, I think that's a hard thing for gun culture to struggle with. Because the accusation brought against them is actually kind of right. Is actually kind of correct. Gun culture in the past, especially the political right and the politically active right, has been very vocal, at least within itself. Not publicly, not out in the streets, but like, we kind of know that if there were ever to be some sort of conflict between the quote-unquote political left and the political right, the right has more of the guns and they have more of the whatever. And then there was also the other example of this is Antifa versus the Proud Boys. And so like when the Proud Boys responded to Antifa, they just wiped the floor with them because Proud Boys were like muscly big dudes, right? But what the left did intelligently is they outwitted the right, and they got the Proud Boys to be considered in some cases domestic terrorists.
And that's the interesting thing that's kind of shifted now, but the media, the mainstream media, was predominantly left, so they had the power of presentation like that.
Mm-hmm.
You could be the complete opposite, as Proud Boys was,
Mm-hmm.
and you can spin it a certain way to where it's like, hey, look at these guys, and then everyone goes, oh, look at those guys,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's it.
You, as in, like, one of the things, and this isn't one of the things that the right could have done better in that era is actually do a better job at demonstrating what the left was actually doing.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. They got played very effectively into a trap. It was a 40 chess ambush, and I think the right doesn't like to admit it, that they not only were they done wrong against, but they played into a pretty stupid trap.
Yeah, that happens.
Mm-hmm. You got to learn from it. We're gonna move on. But
Yeah.
It's when you're dealing with legitimate enemies, like, I think sometimes the right doesn't take the left seriously, and sometimes for good reason and sometimes for bad. But I think what we're seeing in the culture war is things that shouldn't be taken seriously take front center, and things that should be taken very very seriously are dissolved into ambiguity.
Yeah.
So I need to give an example of that, but So coming back to the raid, what have you heard some more statements about, like, family members or other cultural events going on?
I know the family put out a statement. I think it was either today or yesterday, just saying that, he was a nice, sweet old man, carpenter. He just made a like a ramp into a house for a disabled man, and that he would just kind of never hurt a fly. Like, he does have. They did admit, I believe, that he has made, like, outlandish kind of, threats maybe on social media. So they didn't completely be like, oh no, he was just our grandpa. They're like, yeah, grandpa said some crazy shit every now and then. But I mean, yeah.
But they didn't think of it as like something to be.
They didn't think that the FBI was going to come, and yeah.
They didn't. Yeah. Well, no. They didn't think that he was going to act out on it.
Right.
I doubt the family thought that he was going to act out on it, because I've got my phone here. I got to pull up another bit in a second here, but all right, go ahead. So the family didn't think that he was going to do anything.
Right.
So I mean, the family of George Floyd said that he was a saint.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know otherwise.
Right.
He wasn't exactly giving charity to wives or widows and orphans when he took a speedball.
Yeah.
And so I wonder. I've been waiting for somebody to do this, and for between you and I, it might be a little bit of an ambush. But I've been waiting for somebody to kind of think about how do they deal with each other and their friends when their friends say things that are a little like, hey dude, that's a little outlandish. Right? Gun culture is pretty good at, like, keeping its shit together, especially when it comes to when someone gets a little too overt.
Yeah. There's definitely a sect, I think, within the culture that is a little bit more outspoken.
Yes.
In that degree, to where it's like you're kind of a keyboard warrior, but at the same time you're within but without. But you're very loud, and we don't want anything to do with loud people.
Yeah, and I think the other side of it is it's really hard to take you seriously.
It's true to a degree. Yeah.
It's really and I've been on the back end of that before, where, like, I was getting really frustrated about things and starting to get too vocal with my close friends, and then they actually came to me, like, they can't take me seriously anymore, and I'm thankful that they actually said that.
Nice.
Because it took a little bit of a shaking up for, like, no dude, you're not. It took them saying that, people whose opinions I respect, to say to me that you were getting a little out there, and the issue is that we couldn't take you seriously anymore. You'd get onto something, and then you would. And I'm thinking later it was painful for a while, but I'm thankful they did that. And so for people that we know, I think gun culture is actually generally pretty good at keeping its people together.
Yeah. Like, and I think that's, I don't know, that might be one of the core things ingrained in the gun community, much like the revolution don't fire to the whites of their eyes. It's like, yeah, we're going to just stay right here and we won't do anything until we're kicked in the fucking chest.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to do it.
So let's take that story and flip it on its head.
Okay.
Let's go upside down. Let's say the Craig Robertson story is what would it what I mean it's not it, what would an example look like where we had our moment, right? The moment of like Concord, right? Where the Revolutionary War started. Lexington and Concord, right? It was your famous Paul Revere. Like that was kind of like they're seizing the guns. Okay, we've gone from negotiations and de-escalation to the situation.
And that's been a really interesting thing too. That like I think a lot of people kind of don't realize or lost. It was like the revolution didn't start when the first shot rang out. It was 5 years plus in the making. Like it started with, slowly speaking out and then kind of getting together secretly and then maybe it'll never happen, but blah, 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 blah. We still desire for independence. And then really once it was to a point where it was like, yeah, we're done.
I don't remember exactly, but I think that
I've been reading the Washington Hypothesis by Tim Ballard, and so it's kind of everything's a little fresh more for me.
Does he talk about what negotiations were looking like before the revolution began? Because
yeah, to a degree, the British were very much, even after several battles, there was a point where I think Washington lost in New Jersey, and he was on the retreat, and the British put out like, "Hey, look, like, we'll pardon you, just stop." Like, disband, go back to your farms, we'll pardon everybody. Kind of like what Russia did with Wagner.
Wagner.
But, yeah, the British did. The British were like, hey, look, we don't want to, like, these are the rules, but, like, we don't want to lose you type deal. Like, we'll forgive you, whether they did or not, would or not, if you get, drawn and quartered. But
secret police, secret hunting. Yeah,
who knows? Yeah, who knows?
The challenge with war is that it's very rarely a decisive victory.
But it was definitely like these were all farmers and business owners and stuff that were like, yeah, we want to be on like George Washington was always saying, like, I want to be on my farm. I don't want to be in Delaware killing people.
Yes.
Like, but we're here.
I think sometimes people within gun culture say things like that, but they don't actually believe them. They'll say, heaven forbid the worst ever happens. And they say it with a wink in their eye. And it's like...
Yes.
And I don't think that happens too often, but I see it every once in a while where, like, heaven forbid the worst should happen. But I know you have that scratching feeling in the back of your head that if you gave them enough whiskey in the right location, they would say, I just say that so I don't get in trouble. And admittedly, I think it sticks out to me because I've seen myself say things like that before. Kind of like knowing that I don't, and that it's a criticism. It's like a self-criticism. I have to be able to criticize myself and make character changes, and so that it doesn't sound like this is just complete lecturing, but because it wouldn't do me any good either. And I'm curious, if I remember correctly, the colonies were sending delegates to England because they wanted a representation. One of the things that they wanted representation in the government system of England, and the king was refusing it, and the parliament was maybe refusing it. Elements of the parliament was refusing it, but they wanted parliamentary representation under the crown, and the crown was refusing it. Which, if that had changed, then I think we would see England, the city of England, as the minor player, and America would have overtaken England very quickly.
It was interesting because, like, it's interesting how it kind of comes full circle to kind of what we're going through today. But like back then, I think it was I can't remember if it was like 64% of the population of the colonies did not want to do it. They were not down for war with Great Britain.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics.
And
on that
so
either.
it was really interesting that it was like, a smaller group of citizens, well, were basically like, yeah, no, we had enough, let's go.
Yes, there were
And
catalyzing
and
events.
then the rest kind of came along. The people who were like, no, we don't want anything to do with that. After our first couple of victories, were like, oh yeah, let's go. Like, okay.
Yeah, in any population, you're gonna have a subsect. Some people are just gonna be joiners. Some are gonna be leaders. Some are gonna be naysayers. Some are gonna be into it 100% from the beginning, and some of them are never gonna. Right, you're gonna have your different categories. I'm sure there's elements of the population that became America that were only interested in the war so long as it was fiscally beneficial to them.
I'm sure, yeah.
Right? Oh, they were only willing to join in the war when they were promised land. I wouldn't expect to go fight a war against the world superpower if I was going to end up destitute and alone, even if we won. I mean, I wouldn't go to war with Russia if I
Right.
was as a conscript.
Right.
That's especially, I mean, as an American, right? I wouldn't go to war against Russia as a conscript. I'd expect to get something out of it. If we win, what do I get?
Well, and that's something you've said too. Is like, I'm not going to die for Biden's war.
I'm not going to die for Biden's war. I think that so much of the Ukrainian war right now is just simply the manifestation of the Biden family's corruption, as well as where how far their tendrils extend. Because of you've had essentially stagnation and corruption in the American government,
Yes.
which has produced the fertile ground for conflict in Ukraine. For more, and it's just it's also convenient that Ukraine is a historically has a historical ties with Russia.
Yeah.
And against Russia as well. So
Well, not to mention their past of corrupt government officials as well.
yeah, which shouldn't be overblown or ignored. But I think there's money involved in it.
100%.
And
There's always money involved in war.
yeah, well, I've benefited from it. So cheers to that. I've paid my bills occasionally with war money, and it doesn't mean that we need to create that system for the future.
No.
So, So let's talk about. So, what do you think is going to happen in the next 4 years or the next 4 months? What do you think 2024 is going to be like?
I definitely don't have much of a 4-year plan. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I think for the first time, a lot of people are realizing that a sitting president is trying to incarcerate his political opposition. It is blatant.
Yes.
You cannot hide it or deny it.
Yes.
You cannot be someone who voted for Biden last year and go, no, he's doing okay.
He's doing the right thing.
Like, no.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think the whole Trump legal thing is gonna, either accelerate or disappear. Mm-hmm. I mean, the options are endless. I think.
What do you think of de-escalation?
But I think that's just a small part of what is gonna. I mean, it's an election year. Mm-hmm. Is it gonna be 2020 2.0? Like,
it's too many numbers. 2020, the year is it going to be the summer of love 2.0?
Yeah. Is it going to be the summer of love 2.0?
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
When I'm out in the field and I'm doing some work, I kind of have there's this like spidey sense thing that goes on, and one of them is it's kind of like a rule of thumb. You can break the rule. There are exceptions to the rule, but it tends to generally be correct, and that is. The more I see people expecting something big to happen, the less likely something big is going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think my concern for political unrest in the United States for 2024 will be heavily impacted and measured against how vocal people are at thinking it's going to happen. Because the more anticipation there is for it, the less likely I think it's going to happen. Because what it'll do is it'll escalate, the social tension will escalate, and it'll hit basically a release valve point where everyone goes, we don't want this. And so then everyone starts looking out for somebody else to do the thing. And that means everybody, instead of being in the streets rioting, are going to be on the rooftops looking for somebody else to riot. And the more people there are on the rooftops, the less people there are on the street. Is it?
Yeah.
Did I explain that pretty well?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I gotcha. I don't know. I agree to some extent, but I also think it's going to be way more out of our hands. And I think what really will be the powder keg will be the political part of next year.
Yes.
Whether if Trump goes to jail.
And the timing of how that works.
Yes.
Because if he goes to jail tomorrow, it'll be very different than if he goes to jail the day before his big rally in Arizona, in Texas, in Georgia, in Michigan.
Yeah.
That'll be a different thing. If you can rile up the Midwest, you'll...
When I think as it becomes clearer and clearer, like even now, I haven't checked the polls in a few days, but like he's just destroying. Like
Trump is the most likely.
He's in. Like it's done basically now.
If there were a vote today, the likelihood of Trump winning is that
it's over a year till the next election, and he's already. It's just ridiculous seeing the numbers that I saw, and I know DeSantis has gone completely down. I know was it Remy Valak or whatever his name is?
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, he's coming up very high.
Yep.
And I know Trump has talked about VP-ship and stuff. And nobody's paying attention to anything on the left side except for Newsom, which we can get down that rabbit hole later. But yeah, it's just whatever's going to happen. What happens to Trump, I believe, will be what happens to the nation.
That is a strong thing to say. That is a very. What do you mean by that? I mean, fuck. That's a big like.
I didn't mean to drop that kind of bomb, but
no. But it's just like I've heard it before.
Because I mean, if you think about it, if he gets imprisoned or killed, the right will explode. I would think.
I don't know if they'll explode, but I think they will completely recede. I think they will start actively finding
plans.
They will be actively. The right will start actively making roads to separate themselves from the country.
Yes.
Trump will become a martyr.
Yes.
And he will not become a martyr for the right to take over the presidency and to have influence in government. He will become the catalyst martyr for the no longer peaceful divorce of the states.
Yes.
I think that's what will happen.
But then what's interesting is, if he wins, then what does the country look like? Because then at that point, it's not kind of us versus the deep state with Trump gone. It is now kind of the majority against the deep state to where it's maybe politically matched to where, like, what is the left going to do? They're backed into I think if Trump wins and gets in official, I feel like they might be backed into a corner. Who knows what could happen?
Strategically, the right tends to divide the left into leaders and followers. And I think in some ways they play their hand too heavy in this version. And they tend to like not strategically as in their strategy is to, but how it plays out in like a kind of a chessish game. The right tends to view their opponents as ringleaders and sheeple followers, whatever you want to call it, right? You know, like the people who are just... And there's some grounds for this. There's actually a lot of... It's not an unreasonable thing to say. So when the right thinks about the left, they oftentimes think of the deep state and the left. And so how... If they could put a fracture between those two, they would have an advantage. But I don't know, because the institution that is the government is going to seek to justify itself, which is a bit of an assertion. But I don't know. Because if Trump becomes president, it's going to be 4 years of him fighting his own people and fighting for the legitimacy of the United States on the world stage. It's going to be 4 years of him. Will Trump be able to even function as a president because of how much of his physical and mental energy needs to be spent combating a media that has already determined that he's the Antichrist?
But is there so much of that going into next year? Because I feel like the media field has completely shifted.
Tucker Carlson is a major avenue.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely correct. Tucker Carlson. And
Elon Musk purchasing X.
Yep.
Because me and my wife talked about that this morning. It was like, man, I opened Twitter and it's just nothing but right and shouting and, fuck Biden and all that stuff. But she made sense of it where it was like, oh, before Elon bought it, it was censored. You guys were gone. So it seems so loud now because you've been muted for so long.
Okay.
Which I thought was an interesting kind of way to look at it.
Our Twitter algorithms are different because most of mine is left-wing people threatening violence.
Interesting.
I mean, my Twitter.
I don't get much of that.
My Twitter's OSINT. That's all it is. It's a couple of philosophers that I really enjoy listening to and talking with, and then mostly like open source intelligence. Like, I'll play my hand so the world can see it. Like, people are gathering data on you.
Yeah.
And not all those people own the company. Some people are looking at pages and trying to figure when you go on a Twitter and you make a threat, someone's keeping tabs on that, and they're putting you into a category.
Yeah, you had mentioned this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And not all those people are government actors, and not all those people are big tech. Some people are just looking at, okay, so this guy threatened, boom, all right, and this username made this threat. This username made this threat. This username made this.
But outside of a Gestapo-like dystopian future, does that kind of matter? Like, to what? I guess, I mean, we'd be really fucked if this is the case, but at what point does how somebody swats someone because they don't like what they said on Xbox, does it become a swatting of, hey, this guy's got guns and he said stuff, I'm calling it in. So I mean, that's very Nazi Germany.
Very Nazi Germany. And this is why so many addresses to the red flag laws are so consistent.
Yeah.
And I think the red flag law thing is, if there is any element of the gun argument that a person is interested, if a person is willing to even put an ounce of weight into the politics of firearms, the answer is 100% red flag laws. Everything else can come secondary. Not everything else, but generally speaking, because the pre-crime concept of red flag laws is the setting up of the kulaks.
Yeah. Minority Report.
I don't even think it. I don't. I think conservatives are being. I think gun culture is being foolish about it. It's not Minority Report. It's dehumanization. It's not Minority Report. I mean, the big problem about Minority Report is that they dehumanize the entire population by reducing them to pre-crime or aesthetics or whatever. But no, it's dehumanization. It's not complicated. The reason why the DOJ through the FBI, or not the FBI, one of the motivators for the DOJ to use the ATF to go after braces is because AR-15s are the gun of the right. If you think that the left does not view the AR-15 as a right-wing icon, then you're missing the point.
Yeah.
And what is the avenue of approach that Americans buy AR-15s? They buy AR-15s with they bought AR-15s with braces, right? It was a huge economic warfare strategy. How much money do you think is getting pulled out of gun culture because of braces? Right. Maxim suffering, SB Tactical is suffering, Daniel Defense is suffering. Every AR-15 manufacturer is suffering because now they have stock of 10-inch barrels that they can't sell the same way. And they're taking all that money out of our economy, the gun culture economy, which is already not good at paying money, and they're pulling all that out.
Well, especially after 2016. I mean, I witnessed it firsthand with working inside the industry, and everyone was gearing up and ready for Hillary to win. And when Trump won, everyone was sitting on stock for years to where the industry just went pop.
Yeah, it went.
Yep.
It kind of hit like a lull.
Yeah.
Right? We saw it 2013. Businesses and fortunes were made overnight with companies that, or even gun shops that could sell AR-15s and whatever, because you had the Sandy Hook shooting, and then you had the next one, and then you had 16, which was kind of in that lull period. Yeah. Which still had a little. I think gun culture, or the industry side was expecting more sales than they got. Maybe not recognizing that they had just burned a lot of their social capital, not in a negative way, but they had capitalized on a lot of it. And then 2020 was the inverse. Boom, huge spike again.
And then now they're trying to do that 1,000% tax on large cap mags and ARs.
Is that a national thing or is that a local thing? I thought it was a national.
I thought it was a national as well.
Yeah, that won't go anywhere. I mean, it won't stick. I'm not saying that it should be it's stopped, but I don't it doesn't have the force that I think it's expecting to, which I might be caught off guard. But
yeah, I might be in the caught off guard boat with you because I think out of anything it might. And I did hear a lot of talk about Biden executiving it. But who knows? I don't pay attention too much to how many red versus blue sign the bills.
Yeah.
I know I've seen in passing a little bit that it's been skewed and there's been people swapping sides and voting for this or voting for that. But and I don't know where that's going. But just like to circle back why I mentioned the tax is because yes, they're trying to death by 1,000 cuts the industry.
Absolutely, and the having the ATF go after braces was a huge economic victory. It was a huge logistic victory for the left. Not because you and I are as much affected or the end user is affected as much, because they are don't get me wrong, they are affected, but the people who are really affected heavily is the manufacturers and the culture guys and the industry guys and everyone from Garand Thumb to Daniel Defense to Iraq Veteran 88. I mean, sure, we when I'm saying we, like YouTubers and social people, could make some immediate hay, and I don't mean this in a negative sense, by addressing the subject. But the long term effect it's kind of like the fentanyl Chinese thing. How much money does fentanyl cost the United States every year? Yeah. Well, the fentanyl epidemic, if you want to use those words, is extremely effective in destroying American security. And if it is being not employed but used by the Chinese, then they're using why would they give up using a very effective tool to hamper their potential opponent? Right. I don't know. They don't see us as an ally, that's for sure. Yeah. They might see Biden as an ally, but that's a different story.
That's because they paid him off. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Going back to fentanyl, too, and the border, I don't know if you saw those trail cam videos of the military-age males with kit and ARs coming across in Texas. Boy. I know it's kind of nothing new.
It's very not new.
I've known contractors who, would sit in a field on a rifle and take care of stuff, but it's just still seeing it every now and then. You're like, man, that's just right there. And you're 2 hours away from it.
Yeah, I'm now, where I'm at in Arizona, oops. Oh well. Where I'm at in Arizona.
I mean, all of Arizona is, no matter where you're at,
Arizona's a major
it's a border state.
You got 35W, or you got 35, which runs from Texas to Canada, basically. That's a huge blood vein of drug transportation, and then you've got the Phoenix cluster.
Yep, up through Utah and Idaho, up to Canada.
Phoenix access to Vegas, Phoenix access to San Diego.
I witnessed that a lot living in Salt Lake, watching the cartel moved in, and I had some clients who worked for the cartel, and they were just telling me shit, and I would see it. It was interesting because they went from telling me what they were doing to me seeing what they were doing.
Do you think you saw it because they told you, or if they had not told you?
No, if they had not told me, I would have started noticing.
You still would have noticed,
yes. Yes.
Yeah, when the riots. When the 2020 riots burned and destroyed any of the wealth that was left in Uptown, the cartel tried to move in, and that's why there was one of the reasons why there's so much violence in that area is because the cartel, given Midwest refers to it as the cartel, and when you recognize the further south you get, that it's a disparate groups.
Yes,
but cartels were trying to move in and take that territory over for their drug distribution, and they were pushing against different local and semi-national gangs.
Yeah.
Which again, cartels being a funny thing of they're a legitimate threat. They have legitimacy in threats because they can reach out and find you. And
that was an interesting thing. I think Ed Calderon said it. It was like, we will never go to war in Mexico because we will be fighting in our own backyard.
Oh, absolutely.
We will be, they know where we live, they know our families, they know everything. Like, it would just be a mess. Which is, in a way, kind of unfortunate.
Okay. Yeah, so I've known for a number of years now, probably 7 or 8 years, about armed individuals crossing the border. I know of events where the people who are, this is in Arizona, in the kind of like the Nogales area, the people who were going from south to north had G36s, so they were actually just video game bad guys, because that's what video game bad guys carry. In jest, that the equipment that was on the border moving north was better, newer, fancier, or more expensive. Not always, just because it's more expensive doesn't mean it's better than the guys on the north.
Right.
And the other thing that they had, the advantage that the cartel has moving north, is that they have conviction. The United States does not seem to like approach it with anything other than half-assery. Mm-hmm. Not on the operator level, but definitely on the government level.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we've seen that battle the last few months in Texas.
Yep. And this is information that a lot of Americans don't recognize. The kinds of guns that are moving north from the cartels and are being involved in the cartels are not AR-15s. Mm-mm. They're RPKs, PKMs, and RPGs.
Yeah. When I lived in Salt Lake, I knew one of the FN reps, and a couple days before I was at Gallinson's, and they had a semi-auto saw, and it was tan, and I fell in love, but I wasn't willing to spend $6,000. Or I think it might have been more than that. But I had talked to him. I was like, yeah, I was actually just over there looking at it. Like, it's awesome. He's like, yeah, that's actually why I'm here in Utah. I'm here. I'm going to all the border states for FN and taking all of those out and taking them back to FN, because what's happening is the cartel is paying people with clean records $250K to go and get every single one of those guns and bring them over the border, because specifically the saws are easily modified to full auto.
Or they had some process to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then not long after that was the little raid with El Chapo's son, where they surrounded the town and was like, no, with the Barretts and the saws and all the firepower and that. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, it was a couple months after that, and I was just like, Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, their firepower is, yeah.
There was a bit of a social media tiff over the weekend that was kind of funny. There was a journalist fellow that I don't really know much about, and I don't really care to, but he apparently made a lot of claims about how he had created some sort of documentary on some stuff in the past, but I don't know about the credibility of the guy. I don't really know. I'm not going to go after his character too much, but what he was accusing basically this wing of gun culture of being is the greatest threat to the United States, because they're effectively like a mafia without any sort of accountability. And they're the greatest threat. If there were ever to be some political unrest in the United States, they'd be the greatest threat to the country, because whatever. And so he was describing this element of like gun culture, or maybe even he was describing gun culture as a whole and the right as being this well-organized machine of violent extremists. Which is funny, because you and I are inside gun culture, and that is anything but true.
We're organized?
Yeah.
That's the first I'm hearing about it.
Yeah.
We're too busy infighting.
Bro, we use Warno as a marketing term, not as a legitimate...
Yeah.
Like, and trust me...
I think we have never used that term, but...
Yeah, I've used it because...
Yeah, if you think we're organized to that degree, like, no.
Yeah, you think... I don't... Gun culture is not in a condition where, like, if somebody were to, like... you blow the horn of Rohan, all these people would immediately
how
hear...
How glorious would that be?
Would we all come riding in on motorcycles? Just... Some dude...
I would either confuse it with the horn of Gondor or the horn of, like, the Rapture. Either way, I'd be excited. I'd be like, all right, cool. What are we doing?
Finally something.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I don't have to sit here being bored in my living.
Either way, I'm getting out of here.
Yep. Oh, okay, well, I don't have to worry about taxes anymore. Now it's just death. What the male fantasy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, right? Another meme.
The blood diamond meme.
Oh.
How it rings true. That's interesting. I never heard them refer to the gun culture that way.
He was, and I have, like, Malcolm Nance has done it before. He didn't use the word specific gun culture, but he has this belief that, like, the right is some super organized. He kind of describes the right like almost like the Illuminati kind of thing, where like he explains away everything with super organization. And I don't want to put too many words in the guy's mouth, because what does come out of his mouth is entertaining enough. But Malcolm Nance is pretty. In his book, They Want to Kill Americans, he's pretty overt, and he believes that the right is trying to produce militias, or is organized in militias for the purpose of installing Donald Trump as a permanent emperor, so that they can go around the country killing black people and gays. And it's like,
wow,
I love it, dude. I love the fact that that's
quite a theory.
You're so committed to the grift. You're so committed. You bless your heart. It's like, dude, try to get two gun culture people to agree on camo. You're like, AOR1 is better. No, it's multicam black. Like, fuck, whatever, man.
It's not gonna matter in the end.
It's not gonna matter in the end. Yeah, I mean,
I just always pull the Patriot line from the Frenchman. I was like, well, if I die, I'll die well dressed.
I'll die well dressed.
It doesn't matter what. If I'm wearing Yeezys and a plate carrier, I will die well dressed.
Yeah, bury me in it. Yeah.
Nah, take all my shit. Fuck it, I don't need it anymore.
Yeah. Well.
I'll be the best loot drop you ever seen.
Inside of you are two wolves. One of them admits he's a loot drop, and the other one thinks he's got the drip.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so bad. Oh, that's so bad. No. So let's tie back into 2024, because I want to kind of like. I want to do a worst case scenario mentality.
Ooh, we want to get dark.
I want to go dark on it, and then what I want to do is I also want to look at it as even dark is going to have its value on like identifying some risks and threats along the way, but also what are you thinking of? What would be like what is a reaction from gun culture that would be so good that would just fill you with joy? We don't need to get doom and gloom about it, but I have some ideas like that, so I'll go first a little bit. The thing that I'm concerned about in 2020 that I would think is a really, really bad outcome 2024 is Trump goes to jail, and instead of Trump goes to jail, we end up in a war with Russia, a hot war with Russia. And that is used as justification to institute some sort of secret police to squash political opponents.
Yeah.
That would be probably the most overt. I think the most negative thing would be essentially just mass apathy. The overt war with Russia is the least likely one. I don't know what it would look like. Just bad economy, good economic warfare, or a successful economic warfare against the right.
Yeah,
because it has to be economic. It can't be force. But it will not function as force. I don't know. What do you think is going on? What do you think is going on, and where do you think things could go?
I mean, China's. I would almost say, and it might be because I just read that book. I feel like China's way more posed to go hot before Russia.
Okay.
I could see in the South China Sea, China and us having a conflict, and then that signaling Russia to invade Europe.
Why would Russia invade Europe?
Push into Europe.
Okay.
Push up to Poland.
Take
Ukraine, possibly Belarus.
Yep.
With their alignments, and then kind of hold the line possibly at Poland, because I know Poland's super raw right now.
The furthest that I could imagine Russia moving west.
I know they wouldn't get far because Ukraine proved that.
The furthest I think Russia would move would be the Carpathian Mountains. I don't think that Russia would move past the Carpathian Mountains.
Yeah. I don't think they have a desire to reclaim anything that's not what was originally theirs. Maybe.
Yeah, like East Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think so either.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I guess I misspoke by saying push into Europe, but to a degree, it's still politically correct.
Make advances in Eastern Europe.
I do not then politically, I just do not see Biden making it.
I don't see Biden as being the next president, one way or another.
But if not them, then who? If not Donald Trump?
It's gonna be a Gavin Newsom. It's gonna be.
I've heard the pitch for Newsom.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of things.
The one thing that both Donald Trump and Biden proved to the American political system, the one thing that both Biden and Donald Trump proved to the American political system, is that even the least expected candidate can become the president. Mm-hmm. And because I remember in 2016, everyone was getting ready for a Hillary presidency, yep. And we were all expecting like fascist America to pop out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank God she didn't. I mean, thank God she didn't win, because that's a whole can of worms. The disdain for life that class of the disdain for human life that class of politician has. Hey, look. Reveal. Let's just take this down for now. It's rough, but I think I'm glad that Hillary Clinton didn't, but Donald Trump became president. Mm-hmm. And then in 2020, Biden was not a legitimate candidate until he was advantageous for the left. Mm-hmm. Until Russia, Biden was not a legitimate candidate. And that, if you want to put on your tinfoil hat, Biden became the president because Donald Trump was onto something.
Yeah.
I think Donald Trump was starting to discover that there was a big pile of shit underneath that relationship. And I think that's why Biden had to be put in, because if Biden didn't become the president, how could they claim that Trump was going after a political opponent?
Yeah. What's interesting, too, is about his 4 years was like he fought every single day. They were still trying to come after him.
Yeah. He gave them a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Donald Trump didn't exactly. I don't pretend to know everything about his campaign, but I think with the benefit of retrospect, he could have played some things a lot smarter.
To a degree, and maybe he has that now.
Let's hope so.
With, getting completely bland, maybe it's matured a little bit. But I don't know. Definitely the Remy and Newsom. I don't know. I like keeping my eyes on the wild cards, because you never know.
Ramaswamy?
Yeah.
Vivek? Yeah, Vivek.
Yeah, Vivek. Oh, Remy, yeah.
Yeah. I want to make sure I got the right guy. I like it when he talks. I like the way that...
I haven't looked into him too much as I have, like, Kennedy.
Okay.
I definitely like him. I haven't heard too much from him since he did his Rogan episode. But he said a lot of things that I really liked.
Questions about the legitimacy of letter agencies and yeah.
I mean, he's kind of following in the footsteps of his uncle, and I like that. Okay.
For those who are not as familiar with the history of the Kennedys outside of the ex-president, how would you fill that in?
Say that one more time.
Like, up until another Kennedy started running for presidency, I didn't know that his father was killed. I think a lot of our generation has no understanding of who the Kennedy family is outside of the one who died.
Right.
Outside of the one who was assassinated.
Right. Right. And I don't really know the details on was his father or his brother? Because Uncle was JFK.
Yeah, JFK, and then JFK's brother was killed as well, and then
so that was his dad. So that was Robert's dad.
Yep, and Robert, and so yeah, because now JFK, JFK's brother, now the RFK.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I don't know. I think I like him. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and I like it. It means you got something to prove.
It means you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah,
it really does. I mean, he can't. And this is interesting too, because I think my biggest hesitancy for RFK is that he's going to be a politician first and a culture warrior second.
Right.
And that he's just latching on to the distrust and animosity that people have for the U.S. government.
That's a good way to put that.
And I would be concerned that it's all... I can't validate that in this conversation right now, but I'd be concerned that this is all just a lie.
And I think that's one reason why I don't like DeSantis.
DeSantis has just made so many bad moves.
He has, and I think he's done now.
I don't think
I know he's not, but I think after all this latest Trump stuff, it's just he's completely. I know he's gone down in the polls. I think Vivek has taken him, but I think he's done. I know he was bleeding money as well, so I think he's done, which is fine. I don't really know. I think the thing is like you cannot replicate or compete with the MAGA community out there. It is so deep. It is so just in. They're all in. That you can't bring them to your side. I feel like the Trumpers are kind of like Trump or nothing. And if someone else comes along offering something, it's going to be so hard to pull that crowd.
Yeah.
Because they're so focused on like, nope, 2024 Trump. Like, not again. No more. Like,
I don't know why DeSantis didn't decide to have. I mean, Trump. It's to be clear, it probably has to do with Trump himself. But I don't know why DeSantis didn't try to have more. Let's just call it allegiance with the Trump presidency and his movement.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe there's things that the public is just not privy to.
Yeah. I remember it was a few months now, but I saw a campaign out of his, and it's like him throwing the MAGA hat in the trash and then like putting on a DeSantis hat or something like that. And I was like, that's your ad? Really?
That's
like,
a pretty bad move.
Bad. Like, just why?
Yeah.
No, man.
Yeah.
It's not going to get you anywhere. But yeah, so circling back to 2024, it's going to be interesting. I really, we have some theories, but it definitely feels like it's all kind of up in the air. So it's very hard to kind of prophesy what you think is going to happen because there's so many factors leading into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we're looking at is we're looking at a winter of basically tightening down the hatch.
Right.
And that
yes.
That means a winter of I'm not talking about like stockpiling. I'm not talking about buying more stuff specifically in that attitude. Is you have about 6 months to get to know your neighbors. Because those people are still most likely still going to be your neighbors in November of 2024.
Yeah.
And those are good. It's a good thing. You have about 6 months to do an area study. You have to know what's going on in your area and know who are the local politicians and the local ringleaders.
Yeah, that's hard. Coming from living in Salt Lake, that's also a hard thing to do when you live in a bigger city. Because I live in a town of 3,200 people, and I know everyone, and everyone knows me, and so it's very easy to be like, oh, the mayor, oh, the city council, this guy's. Yeah, we know what they're doing. We know what they're voting on. We know the politics at a local level. When you're in Salt Lake City, that's
start
gone.
with your borough.
Yeah,
don't start from the top down. Start from the bottom up.
Yes.
Go to it like who is what your city council? What does your local council look like? Who is is there an alderman? Like, and this is the part that I think is good. An area study. This is the right time to start doing an area study, and that is. What I mean by an area study is I'm not looking at my immediate environment and trying to figure out what I need to do, right? Oh, well, there's these people, so I need to buy that much ammo. No, none of this crap. It's really like know your area and start to have your little yarn map. You know what I mean? like get a map, a physical map. Get two of them, one of them that you can laminate and start taking notes on. Be very keen. Become specific on identifying different levels of infrastructure. Where do you get your water from? Where do you get your food from? What are the main thoroughfares? Where does and start paying attention to those kinds of questions. Like, where are the different religious centers? Where are the different education systems? Where are the different police stations? Where are the different fire departments? And then and become familiar with your area. Where does the terrain change?
Yep.
If you live in a mountainous environment, what is the elevation limits? Where are the airports? Where are and like how do the lorries, how do the semis move through your town? I think that's what we're looking at right now. Is then also take your address book on your phone and start making a web how you talk to people. Like and maybe do an audit of, are you the antisocial one, and ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
Because we don't all live in an environment where all of our friends are in an intermediate AO. I don't think most of us are that way.
No, it's interesting because I was that way until I moved here, and then that all completely disappeared. And it's like, okay, cool. My nearest backup's 2.5 hours away. No, I think you should be outside of it coming up onto an election year. I think you should be involved at your local level, no matter what, because I feel like that's really the only place that's going to make a difference.
I think the difference that you can make on the local level will have a larger impact up the chain than is willing.
But it starts there.
It does, yeah. I think the political conversations within, like, vote on your local level, does even myself or like the person listening to the podcast a little bit of a disservice by saying, like, is that the people who are put in position, that are voted into positions in small towns of a large city, have some impact north.
Yeah.
I think I don't think it's where it should be.
Right.
I don't think it's proportionate to what it should be, but I do think that I do think that it has an upward effect. And
no, I think it starts there. I mean, I think that's one thing the gun kind of culture thing doesn't, maybe just me, but like, do you know who your sheriff is? Do you know your local police department? Do you know who they are? Do you know what kind of people there are? Like, build upon that. If shit went down right now, this town is on lockdown.
Yes.
Like, there's 4 ways in and a river surrounding it. Good luck. We have, we've got things in place. We have all the resources. We have multiple bodies of water. We have multiple farms. We have multiple, like, communal people. Like, I have a chicken lady. I get chicken and eggs from. Like, we all have things that we've also preset to where, like, hey, if something goes down, you got me on this, I got you on this.
Yep.
And then vice versa. Like, we're going to be fine.
I think your bringing up of the sheriff is extremely valuable too, because if there is civil unrest in your area, will that sheriff be an ally or will he be a liability?
Exactly.
Or will he be an enemy? Different categories, but yeah. Because like, that's interpersonal communication. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to become sort of spy master.
No, not at all.
It doesn't at all, but it's like, just that those are useful bits of pieces to know, useful information to have, instead of being wrapped up on what's happening in Washington. Narrow down a little bit.
Yeah.
I heard a story of a community where in 2022, the elections of 2022, basically 3 members of a church all ran for city council, and they all got on the board. Wow. They completely changed the tune of the town, because the town was dealing with some issues, particularly issues with the people who were holding those positions were more beholden to the state, the big city, than their own city.
Right.
Essentially, like, it was in Minnesota, which is no big surprise, but it was like you had a small town where the city council was more interested in tickling the feather of Governor Walz than they were on running their own community, and they were more interested in climbing the political ladder than participating in their local politics and the concerns of the local community, and trying to turn this little town into a small version of a big city, which nobody wanted. Right. And as a result, all three of them got voted out and got voted in by members of a church, and those members of that church are taking steps to retain the integrity of that town. And it's not big news. It's not even catastrophically crazy sounding, but it was just small and effective.
Yep. Yeah, and you love to see it.
It's good things. It's a very good thing.
Yeah. No, I like that.
So let's see. We've covered a lot of stuff. Let's do one more. Let's kind of circle back into the Craig conversation, and let's close this first section up, because we've been recording for about an hour and a half now. So we've actually been going a lot longer than I expected.
I didn't think it was that long.
It's been a good chat. Good. So let's talk about I think we need to go back to this one, and this is with Craig Robertson again. And like, what are some important lessons that are learned from that? Because my worry is that it's going to become a fracturing point in gun culture. And that what I mean by is, look, if you're capable of violence, the people who are most capable of violence are not people who make threats. Even Call of Duty figures this out. I don't make threats, I make promises. Like, okay, bro. But my point in that is, I remember a time before I got in a Ranger Battalion and before I learned how to fight in the capacity that I did, where I thought I would play scenarios in my mind of like being at a location and getting threatened and then like talking my way out of it and being like cool guy bullshit because you're a kid and you think of stupid stories.
Right.
And there was some point in time where I came to realize that that it's not just the dangerous person in the room. It's the men of strength and integrity and character who are the really powerful people are the ones who are not going to make threats. Because it's a tactical disadvantage. Mm-hmm. It's a foolish move. And so the unfortunate scenario that took place in Utah is unfortunate on a couple of counts. Is because one, he had no friends to say, "Hey man, dial it back, dude.
Yeah.
You're dial it back. Like that's not a wise thing to do." I think that's the big tragedy is the people who knew him failed him. Oh, well, he's always saying crazy shit online. Like, yeah, dude, if you've got friends who are saying weird stuff online, go get a beer or a coffee and be like, "Hey, man, I'm not worried about you as in you're insane. I'm worried about you because you're like you're setting yourself up in a very like I care about you."
Yeah,
and it's that I think that's the tragedy that happened to this man, is that no one pulled him aside and said, "Hey, Craig, gotta cut this out, man. Yeah. It's bad for you." Or maybe they did. I don't know. But I think gun culture can be very quick to look at somebody who's mentally dealing with sort of the gravity of our situation, where they wake up one day and they can't pay their bills because the economy's shit, and their job hired some new guy because of a DEI initiative that's terrible at the job and is getting paid more than them. And so they're, oh, hey, look at that. And so they're kind of depressed or whatever. And they look at the world and they, for whatever reason, they kind of go down that spiral of frustration and madness, which is better than being ignorant to the world, but not really, not good. It's not naivety. You're stuck in cynicism. You have to move on to wisdom, and nobody's there to grab them and say, "Hey, bud, let's go." And
it's kind of the classic Joker. You're just one bad day away from being me.
Yeah.
And then what is a madness is like gravity. All it takes is a little push. And it's like we're all out here struggling together.
Yeah.
Like, and some of us are worse than others, but we need to be that community that goes, "Hey, man, like, what are you doing? A, how are you?" But B, if I see none of my friends or people who I follow on social media do this, but if I did see it, I would be the first one to text them and be like, "Hey man, I saw your post. What are you doing?
Are you all right?
Yeah, are you good?" Like, because that's loud.
Yeah.
And I call it being loud. And that's not good for any of us. No. Especially you, and I care about you, so I'm going to reach out and be like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" So yeah, that's one unfortunate thing about that situation.
Yeah. Yeah, they're making like it's hard to take seriously somebody who makes threats on the internet. It's really hard to take anything seriously. But the problem that people will have to deal with is they don't know when you're going to cook off the grenade. And it's like I think what America is dealing with is that we're dealing with it's real now. Like the problem that we're dealing with is real now. You can't vote your way out of it. You can't. We have to pay for the ideological problems that we've taken on,
Yeah.
and we can't just like wait it out because it's driving us mad.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I'm going with this. It's sitting.
I hope that it doesn't
Like,
continue to escalate.
what if,
Because okay, we're all hurting right now, and that's why maybe this guy did what he did. It's going to get worse.
why? Why is it going to get worse?
I think with the ramp up into the next year, depending on certain factors, people are going to start being more at their wits' end. People are running out of money.
Yes.
Gas is going up.
Yes.
Things are happening politically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at what point do people cook off? Could he be the first? And then, we're sitting down this time next year and there's been 12 more? Or who knows? Like, it's just like, man, we just got to have a little bit of accountability within the industry.
Accountability within the gun culture and with the industry is there is a bright light out.
Mm-hmm.
There is a future out. I was listening to a conversation between two guys regarding AI.
Mm.
And they kept going back and forth between the future is either going to be dystopia or utopia.
Yeah.
And I disagree with the premise. There is a third option.
Okay.
And that third option is that people choose neither, and they choose to isolate and protect themselves against the invasiveness of a dystopian future, and they abandon the foolishness of a utopian one. And they instead choose the painful middle, which is not status quo, but it is decentralization.
Yeah.
The unifying factor between dystopia and utopia is there's always some overpowering government. There's some sort of authoritarian God-man thing.
Man, bear, pig.
Man, bear, pig. I think there's a third option, and I think what we're doing is we're looking for that right now. Mm-hmm. And that third option might be, I think it's quite different. I think recognizing that the problem with both utopia and dystopia is they both place government in the seat of godhood. And so people, when they reject that premise that government can function as God, they achieve some sort of, they become in pursuit of a third option. So
I like that.
yeah, it's decentralization. It's kind of the liberty, what we want in liberty. It's what John Stuart Mill might have wanted when he was writing on liberty. It's what a lot of our government was focused on,
mm-hmm.
in that we put in stopgaps so that the dystopian authoritarian government cannot take root, and we do not give the social safety net that's so wide that a utopian fantasy could capture the minds of the population. It's a bit much, but it's a lot at the same time.
No, but then of course it all makes sense, and it's kind of where we're at today as well.
Mm-hmm.
Third option. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm. A third option is one more day on the road, like one foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. It's not reckless abandon or abdication.
Right.
It's one step at a time. Yeah. It sounds maybe a little bit like ethereal, but I'll let it go. So.
And I think some of us, I think, are already on that path. They're just taking it one step at a time.
I honestly think more of us are than aren't.
I agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're like toddlers figuring out how to talk to each other again.
Yeah, and I think we need to talk to each other.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of us are going down this path, and we're not telling anybody we're going down this path.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more we open up and do that, we can connect and form these little communities within the community, within the community, within the community. Mm-hmm. And I think in that lies the future.
Yeah, I think about it this way, is that like Craig, in the situation that happened with Craig, he's not the only one in a situation like let's I don't know everything that was going on in his family, and to be honest, I think it's a tragedy. But and while that sounds like I support the Second Amendment, but it reminds me of this problem of I need to establish I desire to establish trust with my friends such that I can go completely off the rails and I can stare down the barrel of madness and try to talk with them about it so that they can so they can listen to me and help put those pieces back together, and they can be like and they can be there as counsel, not just Stepford wives saying the world's all nice and pretty, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Americans are like that, but a lot of gun culture is definitely sitting there where it's like the idea, well, someone's got to do something about it, man.
But not one person can do it.
And when people start saying that, they oftentimes start saying the things that also are warning signs of hopelessness, right? Oh, someone's got to do something about it, man. And so they and I agree with them. I might agree with the principle, but I don't agree with the solution. And it's like, and when I'm in that position where I'm sitting here going, if I'm come to you and I say someone's got to do something about it, we got to do something about it now. Someone's got to do something, and you can see me making the preparations to do something foolish.
Yes.
What I'm doing is I'm externalizing my internal turmoil onto the world, and I'm taking out my essentially resentment on the world.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of the same thing when men get angry. Most likely it's because we're hurting,
Yes.
but we won't admit it. Some don't. I'll be the first person to cry and tell you that, I'm fucked up. But yeah, noticing those steps and having the community to fall back on to be like, hey man, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I take steps. And
like those kind of warning signs, I guess.
I don't think we know how to do it because but for whatever explanation, I'm not going to explain away the faults of prior generations in this fact, but I wonder if the gun culture and community is all saying the same thing, but no one's saying, here I am, send me. Right? Like, we want to be in community with one another, but how many of us are willing to go out there and be like, I'm going to risk being embarrassed talking to you to try to, not like an asshole, not like, oh man, do you think about that? We need to go build a militia in our basement right now. But like, man, are you doing all right? Like, hey, I need friends, and I like some of the things. I like your character. Can we get to know each other?
We need like-minded individuals, and that's one thing.
How are you doing? You want to come over for dinner?
Yeah. I would like to do that with my buddy Josh, he's up in the UP. I'd like to do that with Colin, my buddy Tyler in Minneapolis. You're here. Like, having people within an arm's reach of like-minded individuals to get together and be like, hey, how you doing? We both like the same things. Let's get together.
Yeah, it's gonna be messy, but once more around the sun.
Yeah,
keep it up, right? Like, we grow older, we make decisions, we have changes in life. But yeah, rebuild that as often as you can.
Yeah,
I think that's gonna be. I think that'll be. I think taking the winter to get to know people. If you're in the Midwest, the nice thing is everybody's indoors, right?
Yeah.
So invite people over.
Yeah. I've got a big shop we could run Sims in.
There you go. Or just
have a chat.
Have a dinner.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to go a lot farther. I think that's going to make 2024 a lot better for a lot of people. I remember when I'm very thankful about it, because when 2020 happened, and I was in Minnesota, and the city was starting to rip itself apart, I had about 10 men that I could call.
Yeah.
And to be clear, by the end of 2020, summer of 2020, about 6 of them still had their wits together.
Wow.
Because 4 of them kind of fell off in different ways. And our let's just say our little But I had about 10 people that I could call, and they all came into our home, and we all kind of talked about stuff, and we established a little network. We had a method of communication, and that purpose was to, like, if anybody needed anything, because we were spread across the town, we could call each other on a certain line, or we could talk on a different line, so that we basically had a red line and a black line.
Yep.
And the red line was for emergencies, and the black line where, like, immediate, there's something in my backyard going on fire and I need someone here right now.
Yeah.
Whereas a black line was like, hey, I heard that this was going on. Can somebody verify it?
Yeah.
I heard that I saw this on a social media post that the rioters were being denied access to burn down this part of a town, so they were going to go after residential people in this part of town.
Yep.
And we're like, can we verify it? And like, there's nobody in the street right now. There's literally nobody here. They're all over there. Oh, okay.
That happened in Utah as well, and I had the red and black line group as well in Utah when everything was going on, and yeah, it was nice to have that sense of like, cool, man, like, we're good. We got this. Yeah,
and I had an advantage because, like, I just basically stole military doctrine and put it into.
It works.
Into like a social environment. Like, basically, when you're in Ranger Battalion, you have this call list, and that's like, you know, if when you're on call, and your platoon's on call, because it's sort of like everyone rotates watch. If you're on call, this guy gets a call and he calls these guys, and then these guys call these guys, and these guys call these guys, and then we also had, so that was like a call list, and then on the other end of it we had platoon sergeant called squad leaders called team leaders called privates, natural dissemination. But the other thing about it too was, we had methods of communication where we could, like, no shit, red line, we're going, let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. No questions asked. Everyone knew the protocol. And that was good. It was good for us. It was good to be able to take that concept and translate it into that situation. However, there was a hangover when it was gone.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, man, I miss having people to call, and had the intensity of my phone going off all the time, and being able to pay attention and talk.
There was definitely a little lull after 2020. It was so eventful. You were on your toes every minute. Yeah. Like, I can't count the nights that I didn't sleep or whatever. And then the invasion of Ukraine happened, and I was up for another 3 days straight. And it was one of those. But yeah, I think, but circling back, I think having that community is essential for the future of this culture. Yeah.
Yep. Invite people over to dinner.
Yep.
Do it. Learn how to cook.
Yep. Know your local PD.
Yep.
Know your local city council.
Alrighty. I think that's enough.
Yeah, that's good.
Enough tutting the gun culture for one day. Well, Ethan, what's going on in your life right now, and is there anything that you want to put out for those who are listening?
Nothing much. Be good to each other.
Be good to each other?
Yeah.
Alrighty.
It needs to be more of that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're learning it. I think we're not alone.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for inviting me over.
Thanks for coming over.
Absolutely. Good timing. And let's wrap it up. So for those who are still listening, I mean, this is the Redacted Culture Cast. What actually keeps the lights on right now, I mean, the hoodies are getting made, the t-shirts are getting made, so all that stuff is going out. What keeps the lights on, if you want to join part of our community, you can head over to redactedculture.locals.com. Again, that's redactedculture.locals.com. We're using locals because it seems to be less problematic than Patreon. When I was working as an editor, I continued receiving a never-ending diatribe of data problems and basic, like, overt censorship coming from Patreon. So we decided to go with locals. I know Dave Rubin had a hand in its start, but I don't think he's there anymore. It doesn't really matter. They've been functioning there. I'm starting to do some private live streams on that one, and that's where I'm going to actually talk about, like, kit and gear and even maybe some more personal subjects, but that's on that channel.
Nice.
And then you can head over to redactedllc.com and join the mailing list, which is called the Dead Drop. We just announced an event we're putting on in the fall, and I'd like to reach out and get some more people there. So we'll see what we can do. But Ethan, it's been great. Thanks for having me over.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And we'll
thanks for everyone for listening.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's see if we can recharge and knock and just jump into another spiral.
Go for 4.
Go for 4.
Has there been more than 3 3 appearances by one person?
So Colin was the first guy ever on, and we
Okay.
were like in my old apartment, just threw everything together in the house, and that's
Awesome.
episode 1. And then he came on again, and then
Just recently on.
yep, and then he was just recently on this week.
Tied for 3.
And so it's more important for me to be able to, yeah, I haven't thought about that. My summer did not go the direction I expected it to, for the better, but it was painful. So
Well, it's been nice having you multiple times.
we'll be around. So all right, let's not Minnesota this goodbye. So we'll talk to you guys later, and yeah, thanks for watching.